Alright. Good afternoon, baseball fans. Big Al here on this Monday, May 11th, 2026, and welcome into another check of the Major League Baseball standings, where we'll be taking a look at the updated standings, games played through May 10th, 2026. We'll also tell you how they did during the week and what their future opponents for this week are. So with that, let's jump into it, shall we? Okay, we're going to start off with the American League East, where we have a new leader. The Tampa Bay Rays have taken over the top spot in the East with a record of 26-13. They are 14-4 at home and 12-9 on the road. They've scored 171 runs and allowed 151 for a run differential of plus 20. They won their last game, and they are 8-2 over their last 10. Alright, so this past week, they had a pretty good one. They split the series, or rather they swept the series with the Toronto Blue Jays 3-0. And then they won at Fenway against the Red Sox 2-1. Posting a record of 5-1 where they scored 24 runs and allowed 11. In the coming week, they'll be playing the Blue Jays again, this time in Toronto for 3 games, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then they'll play 3 at home with the Miami Marlins Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The New York Yankees have fallen back to second place in the East with a record of 26-15. They are 1 game behind the Rays. 14-6 at home, 12-9 on the road. 215 runs scored and 142 runs allowed gives them a run differential of plus 73. They've lost 3 straight games and they are 6-4 over their last 10. The Yankees began the week concluding their 4-game set with the Baltimore Orioles at Yankee Stadium, which they would win 12-1. What's up, Stardust? How's it going? My Monday's good. About to get my patio in my backyard extended out, so we moved the stuff that was sitting in the backyard so they can get to work on it. Hopefully they do it this week. We don't know yet, though. And then they beat the Texas Rangers 2-1 before getting swept in 3 by the Milwaukee Brewers. Dougie Back's in the house. What's up, Doug? Happy belated birthday, bro. So the Yankees ended up going 3-4 on the week, scoring 35 runs and allowing 27. Alright, the Yankees will be road warriors this week. They'll play the Orioles again down in Camden Yards for 3 games, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then 3 at Citi Field against their crosstown rivals, the New York Mets, over the weekend. The Toronto Blue Jays sit 3rd place with a record of 18-22. They are 8.5 games behind the Rays, 12-9 at home, 6-13 on the road. They've scored 164 runs, allowed 176 for a run differential of minus 12. They lost their last game and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Alright, the week started off rough for Toronto as they were swept by the Rays in Tampa. But then they came home and beat the Angels 2-1 for a record of 2-4, where the Blue Jays scored 21 runs and allowed 19. And this week, the Blue Jays will play Tampa Bay again, this time at Rogers Center, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for 3 games. And then they head to Detroit to play the slumping Tigers for 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we'll talk about the Tigers shortly. In 4th place, you have the Baltimore Orioles with a record of 18-23, putting them 9 games behind Tampa Bay. 10-11 at home, 8-12 on the road. 181 runs scored and 222 runs allowed. They have a run differential of minus 41. Baltimore won its last game, but but are only 3-7 in their last 10. So they got drilled last Monday in New York by the Yankees, losing the finale of that 4-game series by a score of 12-1. Then they went 2-1 against the Miami Marlins down in Miami before losing the series 2-1 to the A's. That translates to a 3-4 record. Baltimore would score 27 runs and allow 38. Alright, this week they're playing the Yankees at home for 3 games, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then they travel down to D.C. for the Beltway Series with the Nationals for 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And still sitting at the bottom of the East are the Boston Red Sox with a record of 17-23. They are 9.5 games behind the Rays. 7-12 at home, 10-11 on the road. They've scored 156 runs and allowed 168 for a run differential of -12. They lost their last game as well, and they are 5-5 over their last 10. Boston had a pretty good week. They went to Detroit and swept the Tigers, and then they returned home where they would lose the series to the Tampa Bay Rays 2-1. Putting up a record of 4-2 last week with 26 runs scored and 19 runs allowed. This week, the Red Sox will be playing the National League East, starting off with 3 at home against the Philadelphia Phillies, beginning Tuesday and wrapping up Thursday, before traveling down to the ATL to play 3 with the Braves, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alright, now to the AL Central, which many think would be the worst record in all of Major League Baseball. And leading the way are the Cleveland Guardians with a record of 21-21. 10-9 at home, 11-12 on the road, 173 runs scored to 177 runs allowed. That's a run differential of -4. They've lost 2 straight games, and they are 5-5 in their last 10. Alright, they played within the Central Division last week, going 2-2 at Kauffman against the Kansas City Royals. They were outscored by a run in that series. And then losing the series at home against the Minnesota Twins 2-1 for a record of 3-4. They would score 27 runs and allow 28. This week, the Angels will host the LA Angels for 3 games, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, followed by 3 with their in-state rivals, the Cincinnati Reds, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Moving into second place, you have the Chicago White Sox with a record of 19-21. They are 1 game behind the Guardians, I should say. 9-9 at home and 10-12 on the road. They've scored 171 runs and allowed 185 for a run differential of -14. They've won 2 straight games and they are 6-4 in their last 10. Alright, this past week they lost the series in Anaheim to the Angels 2-1, but then returned home and beat the Seattle Mariners 2-1, posting a 3-3 week, scoring 27 runs and allowing 26. And this week they'll be on the south side, hosting 3 with the Kansas City Royals Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, before the crosstown rival Chicago Cubs come to Rate Field for a weekend set Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Tied for third place, you have the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers, both at 19-22, and both 1.5 games behind Cleveland. Kansas City is 13-10 at home, 6-12 on the road, with 169 runs scored and 183 runs allowed. That's a differential of -14. They lost last game, but they are 7-3 over their last 10. They too played games within their division last week. splitting 4 with the Cleveland Guardians 2 games apiece, and then winning the series against the Tigers 2 games to 1. They would go 4-3 for the week with 29 runs scored and 26 runs allowed. This week they play 3 in Chicago versus the White Sox Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, before traveling down I-55 to play the St. Louis Cardinals at Busch Stadium for 3 Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Detroit, meanwhile, is 12-6 at home and 7-16 on the road. They have the most road losses of any team in baseball. They've scored 175 runs and allowed 171 for a run differential of +4. They did win their last game, and they are only 4-6 over their last 10. And this was a rough week for the Tigers. With the loss of Tarek Skubal due to surgery, he'll be out at least 2 to 3 months. On top of the other injuries they have, including Justin Verlander, Casey Mize, and Zach McKinstry. Plus, Framber Valdez got suspended for 5 games, so that made everything much worse. And last week was very indicative of that. They were swept at home by the Boston Red Sox, where they were outscored 19-7 in the 3-game set. And then they would lose the first 2 games with the Royals in Kansas City before winning last night. They had the worst record in baseball this past week at 1-5, scoring 17 runs and allowing 31. This week, the Tigers are off to New York for 3 against the Mets Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then they return home to Comerica Park for 3 games with the Toronto Blue Jays Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sitting at the bottom of the Central, you have the Minnesota Twins with a record of 18-23. They are only 2.5 games out behind the Guardians. 10-10 at home and 8-13 on the road. 194 runs scored and 206 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -12. They've won 2 straight games, and they are 5-5 in their last 10. Alright, so they had an okay week. They started out losing 2 games to 1 in Washington against the Nationals, before taking 2 of 3 in Cleveland against the first place Guardians. That's a 3-3 record with 29 runs scored and 36 runs allowed. This week they play 3 at home with the Miami Marlins Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, followed by 3 at home with the Milwaukee Brewers Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Moving on to the American League West, led by the Athletics at 21-19. 8-8 at home, 13-11 on the road. 176 runs scored and 182 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -6. They lost their last game and they are 5-5 over their last 10. It was an okay week for the A's as they played 6 on the East Coast, starting off losing 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia and wrapping up winning 2 out of 3 against Baltimore. That's a 3-3 record for the week with 27 runs scored and 23 runs allowed. This week they'll host the St. Louis Cardinals for 3 games, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then the San Francisco Giants are in town Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Texas Rangers are in second place with a record of 19-21. They are 2 games behind the A's. 9-9 at home, 10-12 on the road. 149 runs scored and 152 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -3. They've won 2 straight games and they are 5-5 over their last 10. The Rangers would lose the series at the New York Yankees 2-1 before winning 2-1 against the Chicago Cubs back in Arlington. They had a 3-3 week as well, scoring 22 runs and allowing 24. Alright, they have 3 more games at home against the Arizona Diamondbacks Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then they'll travel to Houston to play 3 with the Astros Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In third place are the Seattle Mariners with a record of 19-22. They are 2.5 games behind the A's. 12-11 at home, 7-11 on the road. 167 runs scored and 165 runs allowed gives them a run differential of +2. They've lost 2 straight games and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Okay, the Mariners started out the week winning the series against the Atlanta Braves 2-1. And then they went to the south side of Chicago where they would go 1-2 against the White Sox for a 3-3 week, scoring 25 runs and allowing 24. Alright, they have a big 4-game series in Houston against the Astros. That's Monday through Thursday, before the San Diego Padres come to town for 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Tied for last place are the Los Angeles Angels and the Houston Astros, both at 16-25 and both 5.5 games behind the Athletics. We'll start with Houston, who are 9-10 at home and 7-15 on the road. 196 runs scored, 230 runs allowed. That gives them a run differential of -34. They've lost 2 straight games and they are 5-5 over their last 10. The Angels, meanwhile, are 8-10 at home and 8-15 on the road. With 177 runs scored and 201 runs allowed, this gives them a run differential of -24. They won their last game and they are 4-6 over their last 10. Alright, the Angels won the series against the White Sox 2-1. Then they would lose the series in Toronto 2-1 to the Blue Jays. They went 3-3, scoring 19 runs and allowing 28. This week, they play 3 at Progressive Field against the Cleveland Guardians Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, before coming home to host their crosstown rivals, the Los Angeles Dodgers, for 3, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. While the Astros went 1-2 against the aforementioned Dodgers, and that was in Houston. Then they went to Cincinnati where they dropped 2 out of 3 to the Reds. They posted a 2-4 week, scoring 18 runs and allowing 29. This week they'll host the Seattle Mariners for 4, Monday through Thursday, and then 3 with the Texas Rangers, Friday through Sunday. So that's a look at the American League standings through May 10th. Now we'll jump over to the National League, starting in the Eastern Division with the Atlanta Braves, owners of baseball's best record at 28-13. 12-6 at home, 16-7 on the road, 228 runs scored to 141 runs allowed. This gives them a run differential of +87, which is the best in the majors. They've won 2 straight games, and they are 6-4 over their last 10. Alright, the Braves did lose the series in Seattle 2-1 to start off their West Coast trip, but then went to Dodger Stadium and took 2 of 3 from the reigning world champions, posting a record of 3-3 for the week, scoring 23 runs and allowing 17. This week, the Braves host the Chicago Cubs in a big 3-game set Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, before the Boston Red Sox come into town over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for 3 games. We have a 3-way tie for second place in this division with the Philadelphia Phillies, Miami Marlins, and Washington Nationals all at 19-22 and all trailing the Braves by 9 games. Philly is 12-12 at home, 7-10 on the road. 170 runs scored and 202 runs allowed. That's a run differential of minus 32. Yeah, we can get you out of here. There we go. Can't have those comments in here. Anyway, the Phillies scored 170 runs and 202 runs allowed gives them a run differential of minus 32. They've won 2 straight games and they are playing much better, 7-3 over their last 10. The Marlins are 14-12 at home and 5-10 on the road, with 176 runs scored and 179 runs allowed for a run differential of minus 3. They've won 2 straight and they are 4-6 in their last 10. While the Nationals are 6-13 at home and 13-9 on the road. 217 runs scored to 230 runs allowed gives them a run differential of minus 13. They've lost 2 straight games and they are 5-5 over their last 10. Alright, we'll start off with the Phillies. Last week they won both series against the A's and Rockies, going 2-1 in both series for a record of 4-2, with 38 runs scored and 28 runs allowed. Alright, they're hitting the road this week. First to Fenway Park for 3 with the Red Sox, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then 3 at PNC Park in Pittsburgh against the Pirates Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, the Marlins concluded their 4-game weekend series with the Phillies down at Marlins Park last Monday and lost the game. They would then go 1-2 against the Baltimore Orioles and 2-1 versus the Washington Nationals, posting a record of 3-4 with 30 runs scored and 32 runs allowed. Alright, the Marlins will be traveling this week. They're in Minneapolis for 3 with the Minnesota Twins, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And that's followed by 3 in Tampa Bay, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the Nationals last week went 2-1 against the aforementioned Twins, 1-2 at the aforementioned Marlins for a 3-3 week, where they scored 33 runs and allowed 33 runs. They got 3 in Cincinnati against the Reds Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, followed by 3 with their Beltway neighbors, the Baltimore Orioles, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at Nationals Park. The New York Mets sit with the worst record in baseball through May 10th at 15-25, already 12.5 games behind the Braves. 6-12 at home, 9-13 on the road. 139 runs scored to 170 runs allowed. That's a run differential of minus 31. They've lost 2 straight games and they are 5-5 over their last 10. Alright, they were out west last week, going 2-1 at Colorado and 1-2 at Arizona, for a record of 3-3, where they scored 21 runs and allowed 21 runs. This week, the Mets play 3 at home with the Detroit Tigers Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then the New York Yankees come to town for the Subway Series Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alright, moving on to the National League Central, which is a dogfight to say the least. Leading the way, you have the Chicago Cubs at 27-14. 18-5 at home, and that includes 15 straight on home turf. And 9-9 on the road. 215 runs scored and 168 runs allowed gives them a run differential of plus 47. They lost 2 straight games, but they are 8-2 over their last 10. Alright. So the Cubs began the week sweeping 4 from the Cincinnati Reds at Wrigley Field before going down to Arlington and losing the set to Texas 2-1. for a 5-2 record where they scored 30 runs and allowed 25. Alright, this week, the Northsiders will visit the Atlanta Braves for 3 games, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's pretty much for supremacy on the senior circuit. And then they play 3 in Chicago against their crosstown rivals, the White Sox, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You have a virtual tie for second place in the division with the Milwaukee Brewers and the St. Louis Cardinals. The Brewers are 22-16, while the Cardinals are 23-17, both 3.5 games behind the Cubs. Milwaukee is 13-8 at home, 9-8 on the road, 195 runs scored and 141 runs allowed for a run differential of plus 54. They've won 4 straight games, which is the longest current win streak in the majors, and they are 7-3 in the last 10 games. Alright, looking at the Brewers, they ended up playing 2 of the 3 games in St. Louis against the Cardinals, going 1-1. I think it was the second game of the series that was postponed. But then they went 2-2 in San Diego against the Padres. They would win the first 2 games of the series before dropping the last 2. So only a 2-3 record for the Cardinals this week, where they scored 20 runs and allowed 17. This week, they're off to Sacramento for 3 with the A's, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, before returning home to host their Show Me State rivals, the St. Louis Cardinals. Or rather, the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs, that's football. Sorry. The Kansas City Royals. And that series is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sorry about that, guys. And then the Brewers, as mentioned, they split 2 with the St. Louis Cardinals at Busch, with 1 game postponed. And then they return home and swept the New York Yankees 3-0. They would post a record of 4-1 for the week, with 23 runs scored and 14 runs allowed. Next up for the Brewers, you have 3 games at home with the San Diego Padres, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then they're off to the Twin Cities for 3 with the Minnesota Twins, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then you have a straight tie for last place in the division with the Pittsburgh Pirates and Cincinnati Reds, both 22-19 and both 5 games behind the Cubs. What's up, Anna? How are you doing? Happy belated Mother's Day. Alright, the Pirates are 11-9 at home, 11-10 on the road, 206 runs scored, 175 runs allowed. That's a run differential of plus 31. They lost their last game, and they are 6-4 over their last 10. Alright, last week the Pirates went 2-1 in Phoenix against the Arizona Diamondbacks, and wrapped up the West Coast trip losing 2 out of 3 in San Francisco. They posted a record of 3-3 for the week, scoring 26 runs and allowing 26. Alright, they're back home in the friendly confines of PNC Park, playing 3 with the Colorado Rockies, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and 3 with the Philadelphia Phillies, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Meanwhile, for the Reds, they are 12-9 at home and 10-10 on the road. 164 runs scored and 197 runs allowed for a run differential of minus 33. They've won 2 straight games, but they have been cold recently, going 2-8 over their last 10 games. And it started off real rough for the Reds, losing all 4 at Wrigley to the Chicago Cubs before coming home and taking 2 out of 3 from the Houston Astros. The Reds went 2-5 for the week, scoring 23 runs and allowing 34. And this week they'll host the Washington Nationals for 3 games, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then it's 3 at the Cleveland Guardians Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That brings us down to the National League West, where we have a tie at the top of the division with both the San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers, both at 24 and 16. We'll start with the Padres, who are 13 and 10 at home, 11 and 6 on the road, 170 runs scored, 167 runs allowed. That's a run differential of +3. They've won 2 straight games, and they are 5 and 5 over their last 10. Alright, so they went 2 and 1 in that quick 3-game road trip in San Francisco against the Giants, and then they returned home and went 2 and 2 against the St. Louis Cardinals, posting a record of 4 and 3, 24 runs scored and 23 runs allowed. This week, they play 3 in Milwaukee against the Brewers Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and 3 at the Seattle Mariners Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Dodgers, meanwhile, as my screen was trying to fade, are 13 and 8 at home and 11 and 8 on the road. 203 runs scored, 134 runs allowed. That's a run differential of +69. They've lost 2 straight games, and they are 4 and 6 over their last 10. Alright, they started off the week in Houston going 2 and 1 against the Astros, and then dropped that big series to the Atlanta Braves at Dodger Stadium 2-1 as well. So that's a record of 3 and 3 for the week, with 28 runs scored and 22 runs allowed. Alright, they have a big series to start off the week 4 with the San Francisco Giants beginning tonight and going through Thursday. And then they head down the freeway to play the Angels for 3 games Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In third place in the West are the Arizona Diamondbacks with a record of 19 and 20. They are 4.5 games behind both LA and San Diego. The Diamondbacks are 12 and 9 at home, 7 and 11 on the road, with 169 runs scored and 191 runs allowed. That is a run differential of -22. They've won 2 straight games, and they are 3 and 7 over their last 10. Alright, and they were at Chase Field all week last week, losing the series to the Pittsburgh Pirates 2-1, before taking the series from the New York Mets 2-1, for a record of 3 and 3, with 19 runs scored and only 10 runs allowed. Alright, they're hitting the road this week. They have 3 in Arlington with the Texas Rangers Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, followed by 3 in Denver against the Colorado Rockies Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In fourth place, you have the San Francisco Giants at 16 and 24. They are 8 games behind the Padres and Dodgers. 10 and 12 at home, 6 and 12 on the road. 130 runs scored and 178 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -48. They won their last game, and they are also 3 and 7 in their last 10. Alright, so the Giants lost the series to the San Diego Padres 2-1, and then beat the Pittsburgh Pirates 2-1 for a record of 3 and 3, with 24 runs scored and 38 runs allowed. This week they have 4 with the Dodgers in LA beginning tonight and running through Thursday, and then they head to Sacramento for 3 with the A's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And rounding out the National League West are the Colorado Rockies with a record of 16 and 25. They are 8.5 games behind LA and San Diego. They are 8 and 11 at home, 8 and 14 on the road. 175 runs scored and 210 runs allowed gives them a run differential of -35. They've lost 2 straight games, and they are 2 and 8 over their last 10. Alright, and they would go 2 and 4 versus the National League East last week, losing the series at home to the Mets 2-1, and then losing in Philadelphia 2-1 on the first leg of their Pennsylvania road trip. So again, that's a 2-4 record where they scored 25 runs and allowed 38. And the Pennsylvania road trip continues with 3 at the Pittsburgh Pirates, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, before they return to Coors Field to play 3 with the Arizona Diamondbacks, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alright, so taking a look at the playoff standings through May 10th. Tampa Bay takes over the number 1 seed in the American League as leaders of the East. The Athletics held on to the number 2 spot as leaders of the West, while the Central Division leading Guardians are the number 3 seed. And as for the wild card picture, as of right now, the 3 teams with the wild card would be the New York Yankees at 26-15, the Texas Rangers at 19-21, and the Chicago White Sox also at 19-21. They would be your 3 wild cards in the American League. Detroit, Kansas City, and Seattle are all a half game out. Toronto is 1 game out. Baltimore and Minnesota are both 1.5 games out. Boston is 2 games out. The Angels and Houston Astros are both 3.5 games out. While on the National League side of things, my computer is so slow. There we go. Okay. On the National League side of things, the Atlanta Braves would have the top seed in the NL, with the Chicago Cubs just a game behind in the number 2 spot, and then the San Diego Padres would overtake the LA Dodgers based on tiebreakers into that number 3 spot. And then looking at the National League wild card race, come on, computer, thank you. Okay, the Dodgers are relegated back to the top wild card spot at 24-16. Milwaukee would be the number 2 wild card at 22-16. And the St. Louis Cardinals would have the 3rd and final wild card spot at 23-17. This would put Pittsburgh and Cincinnati only 1.5 games out of that 3rd wild card spot. Arizona is 3.5 games out. Philadelphia, Miami, and Washington, the 3 teams tied for 2nd in the NL East, are all 4.5 games out of a wild card spot. San Francisco is 7 games out. Colorado is 7.5 games out. And the New York Mets are 8 games out already. And that's a look at your Major League Baseball standings through May 10th. Alright, as for my television fans out there, I'm postponing episode 34 of Television Station History till either tomorrow, Tuesday, or Wednesday at the latest, but it's coming, so make sure you join me for that. Also, the 2026 NFL schedule will be released on Thursday night. I will be live either Friday or Monday to run down the entire schedule, who every team plays, where they're playing, and when they're playing. That's coming up either end of this week or early next week, so make sure you join me for that. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Big thanks to Anna Rodriguez. YBA, I don't know what that is, but thanks to him. Also, Stardust Dreamers and Dougie Mac. Thanks for joining. In the meantime, Big Al signing off. And again, we'll be back either tomorrow or Wednesday with episode 34 of Television Station History, where we'll look at their Fox station in Chicago, WFLD. Alright, thanks for watching. Peace out.